correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPGs, a podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience.
What is up, Gamer Nation? How's it going? Me and Steve Talk RPGs podcast back at you with a new one. I'm Steve. I'm here with Steve.
I'm the other Steve.
Yeah, you're the other Steve. Yeah, that's typically what that means when I say I'm Steve and I'm here with Steve.
Yeah, well, that could mean I'm Steve, too.
I'm not just talking about myself.
We need another person we can just call three.
Yeah. I got Steve and Steve and Steve, and that's Steve.
At work, there's three Steves, and we work, like, right now, the one is about 8 feet from me, and the other one's about 15 feet on the other side of him.
There's another Steve at my work, and I keep getting called the other Steve, and I don't know how I feel about that.
Well, see, at one point, we had another guy start whose name was also Steve, and so we literally, we're just going to call you three. And he was like this 19-year-old kid, so he really didn't know how to take it.
Yeah, just like, okay. All right, well, let's get into it. Let's jump into our podcast for the week.
Okay.
I think you had one.
Yes. Today, the D20 shout-out was going to go to Primed by Cortex, which is a pretty new podcast on the network. They actually joined like the day after we did, but it's run by JT and Kirby, and they're talking all about the new title from Fandom, Cortex Prime, which is a modular toolbox game designed to do a lot of different things. I mean, their publishing settings, I know they have the Heroes of Grayskull supposed to be coming out, but they've also said they're going to open up, I think they're going to call it the Cortex Creator Studio or something. It's going to function very much like the Foundry for Genesis or the DM's Guild, or I forget what the name of the one is for Savage Worlds. But, you know, it's going to be one of those sites where you can get fan-created content, and they've already talked with a couple people. They talked with one guy who made a really cool werewolf setting. They were talking to another guy on an episode I listened to today that did some pretty neat kind of intro educational settings for it to, like, teach people how to play it and stuff. So I thought it was pretty cool. So like I said, go check that out. It's called Primed by Cortex. And if nothing else, you can find it on the D20 Radio website, which also, by the way, is home to the D20 Radio blog, which has all sorts of neat gaming and geekery information.
I gotta say, JT's one of the coolest guys on the network. Well, everybody's cool on the network, but JT's one of the coolest guys out there.
JT's cool. I think he does like he runs the Discord and all kinds of other crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, he writes for the blog, too.
Well, do you want to get into it, Steve?
What are we getting into tonight? Are we going to do like a story time episode tonight?
Yeah, I think story time is appropriate.
Well, yeah. Well, you know, we did have Big Papa Pump, or however he would like his name said. That's what it looks like a contracted form of. Wanted to hear the night that Bubba went crazy, and a couple other people have mentioned it. And now there's actually 2 people on our Discord who were there that night and participated. Well, 3 technically, if you count me. But in any case, I don't want to dive right into that because there's a little bit that you need to understand and set up for it.
Let's be honest. Any good RPG story, you have to start with context.
And by the way, too, last week I kind of went off on Rifts a bit. And this is from the Rifts campaign I ran in college. So, like I said, I've had a lot of fun playing the game, and I do love the world. But it suffers mostly from being old and not having been updated, I think is the best way to put it, and we'll leave that at that. But in any case, so the first thing I'm going to do is tell you about what was probably the most memorable character I ever got to play with, be at the table for or whatever, however you want to say it, okay? And this wasn't my character. This was the Twinkie Avenger. Now, to explain this, in Rifts, there's a class of characters called a crazy. And what they are is they're regular people that have had they're called mind over matter implants installed, and they give them basically superpowers. Like, let me look here real quick, but I think they get like a bonus to endurance, strength, speed, reflexes, enhanced healing, bunch of stuff, okay? But they pay for this with the side effects of these implants, which cause them all sorts of mental issues. So anyway, as you're going through creating the character, one of the things that you do, they automatically get what they call a random crazy element, which is a D100 table. It only has like 4 entries in it, but it kind of tells you what the baseline for your crazy is. And there's 4 things on here. There's frenzy, there's power by association, there's multiple personalities, and there's crazy man. So, well, actually, let me back this up even just a hair more, and then we'll come back to this. So, beginning of my sophomore year, we're playing Call of Cthulhu in what would equate to the Student Union building. I can't remember the name of it now, but at Ohio University where I went to school. And this guy comes in, talking to him because we hadn't quite started yet. He's like, yeah, I play riffs and stuff. I'm like, oh, I play riffs. And so we ended up, I don't know if got each other's phone number, because this is back in the day when like email wasn't even a thing, you know what I mean? I mean, it was, but like most of us just had our school emails. So in any case, a few days later, whatever, we're rolling up a character for him. And so, he goes through and he does all his stats and everything else, and he gets to this table and he rolls the power by association. And what that does is it's basically when the character came to from having the implants put in, they associate those powers with some object, food, could be daylight, could be at night, whatever. So he rolls power by association. Then he rolls the food thing, that he associates his powers with a given food. Well, again, this is the D100 table, and I don't know who wrote this table because it has some things that are relatively common, like, it's got like garlic, it's got granola bars, but then it's got like just weird stuff like raw brown rice and pig's ears and just a bunch of weird stuff, right? Well, what he rolls on this table is asparagus dipped in vanilla yogurt. And so it's like, well, he's like, that's just weird. And so I look at the table, and at the very bottom of the table, it says Twinkies. And I go, well, we could just make it Twinkies. And Andy looks up at me and goes, is that really on there? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And it's just like, he takes off, and he's going through all the rest of this stuff, right? And he's this and that, and he's changing a couple of his skills around and stuff, because I think we gave him 2 extra skills. I gave him Twinkie lore, and I believe he had a skill that was art as it pertains to Twinkies, okay? Because one of the things he did, in Rifts there are these things called fusion blocks, which are effectively like super grenades. They're like a little block of explosive, right? Well, he's like, I'm going to paint all mine to look like Twinkie boxes. Like, okay. Because, we all know that Twinkies will survive the apocalypse if nothing else does. There'll be Keith Richards with a box of Twinkies and a handful of cockroaches after the bomb. So he just goes completely down this train. He has a hover bike. He names his hover bike FD&C Yellow Number 5. Just on and on down this insane superhero kind of character, right? And then now we had another character in the party, and this will all play into the night that Bubba went crazy, a little later in the evening here. We had another character in the party who was a Cyber Knight, which are kind of like, think kind of a mix of like a 2nd edition D&D paladin with a Jedi, kind of a very chivalrous, but a little bit mystical too, in a way, And because it was how he was, Twinkie would always look at the Cyber Knight and go, come on, faithful sidekick, which, of course, irritated the crap out of the Cyber Knight. And Twinkie would do things like, there was a set of armor you could get in the game that had these, like, I want to call it kind of like the Predator cloaking function, except it wasn't really cloaking. It was more like a fiber optic thing, where it kind of would auto camouflage, but it wasn't full on cloaking. Well, he ended up getting a set of that somehow, and I don't ever remember him saying this when he bought it, but he insisted that he paid extra for it, and all he ever did with it was just amusing stuff. So they ended up in South America. So he says, oh, I have the armor. Put on a big yellow smiley face, and above it says hola, and underneath it says amigo. And I'm just like, okay. And so, like I said, this was just a really zany kind of superhero complex character. It was really a lot of fun, and to the point where the whole time that I knew him when we were in school, he actually referred to himself as Twinkie. Like, he would call me and leave me messages. Hey, Steve, it's Twinkie. Blah, 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 blah. But we played Rifts together for 2 years, I think. So yeah, like I said, this character was just just a riot to be around and amazing fun to watch at the table. So, you have any really memorable characters that you've played with, be they your own or someone you played with was playing?
I have a couple.
Okay.
I have two that come to mind. One we played completely wrong, but I don't care because it was fun, and the other one is mine.
Okay.
So the first one that comes to mind is my buddy's first D&D character he ever played.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to play a dwarf paladin. That's what he wanted. And back in 2nd edition, they took some heavy penalties to charisma, and like basically they were very explicitly like, yeah, you're a dwarf, you can't communicate that well. You're more about like mining and being antisocial. And so I misunderstood what charisma meant. And so he had a negative charisma modifier, which was pretty hard to do in 2nd edition, but we did it somehow. Anyways, what ended up happening was we decided that we would just give him a bunch of sprites that would sit in bags around his waist and speak for him.
Okay.
Because he couldn't communicate effectively. His charisma was just too low. He couldn't even talk to people. So he left it up to me.
That's dangerous.
It really is, isn't it? Like... And so he would talk every now and again. He would get out like these 3-word sentences. Like he would say his name and he would be able to like just get like a 3-word sentence out. And then he would leave it up to the little sprites to talk for him. And like he was talking to somebody at a bar and it was going well. And I was making him roll checks. And I don't even remember what I was making him roll because honestly, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just sort of guessing, and so I was making him roll dice, and based off the number he got was the response out of the sprites he got. So one was just always hungry.
Okay.
And the other one was like basically this saintly sprite who just could do no wrong. And then there was a third one that was the exact opposite of that. His whole purpose in life was to make this man die and watch him burn.
Okay.
And so they were in a bar and they're having this conversation to hire this guy on. And he rolls badly. And the evil one comes out and just goes, punch me in the face. And the look on my buddy's face as this big burly dude just stands up, cocks back, knocks him out. At first level, all right, first level in AD&D is just as deadly as low levels in anything. Knocks him out. Proceeds to pick a fight with the rest of the bar, almost TPKs the party. They all crawl out of the bar. That was the most memorable character that I was ever around. And then we'll get into dubs. So I'm going to talk about Cyberpunk, the one that you just ran. I think he's the most memorable characters I ever made. And I've talked about him a little bit here. I've talked about him quite a bit, actually. But Dubs is a weird beast, man.
Dubs was fun, though.
He was. I'm not going to argue with you. Dubs was a blast to play. However, Dubs, and you pointed it out, and you were right, Dubs really shouldn't have been a player character. Dubs was just sort of an NPC voiced by me.
Well, I mean, we had a lot of fun with different scenes with him, but...
Oh, no, I'm not saying we didn't. But Dubs, in the sense of a Cyberpunk game, had no practical abilities. He could probably patch you up really good, but he couldn't shoot worth anything. He couldn't drive a car. I sunk all of his points into being a doctor. And Dubs was this weird mix of like a doctor and just a weird German scientist. And the craziest part is we're working on our episode to talk about Cyberpunk Red. And I'm reading through Never Fade Away again. And it's like... in that, there is a weird German doctor that patches up Johnny Silverhand. And I message you because I'm like, I've read this a couple times. I remember there being a doctor. I don't remember him being a crazy German man. Not that I just manifested that out of nowhere, but...
Well, you know what? I remember him going to see the doctor in the original one, and I read the new one, and I didn't catch the German part of it either, so I don't know.
Yeah, I read it and was like, what? Where did this come from? But it gets, like, Dubs was just such a weird guy. Dubs had a collection of body parts that we never acknowledged.
Well, other than the time that you and Well, the fixer made puppets out of them.
That's true. We did make those mannequins. Dubs had a neighbor that he probably was going to kill.
or the neighbor was going to kill him.
Yeah, either way, it was going to end somehow. It was like Spy versus Spy. Like, that's what it reminded me of.
Oh, yes. Dubs was, and the answering machine was good, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, using the fixer as the answering machine. Or, no, hiring a guy to be the answering machine.
Right.
Yes, you're the machine.
Yes, Dubs was fun.
Dubs was a blast. Oh, I forgot about the answering machine. I honestly did. Dubs just paid some poor dude that was like down the street to answer this, like to answer a
the payphone out in front of his building.
Yeah.
Because that was how he did his side work, so to speak. You know, he didn't want him to call his actual phone.
Exactly. You don't want people calling the house. That's just gonna give away all of your information. Oh. In the Schwarzenegger Memorial Hospital.
Oh, yes.
It's just such a good character. I loved it.
Yeah. Well, the Schwarzenegger Memorial was your idea, but I'm like, yeah, sure, that sounds great. Let's run with that.
It really does, doesn't it? We're, playing in Night City, so it's like California area.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is perfect. Like, this is something that I could see absolutely being in Night City.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well, and I mean, even in I forget, one of the Chromebooks or something, there is a reference to Arnold Schwarzenegger in one of the 2020 books somewhere.
Well, there's a lot of references to both 80s action heroes and 80s action movies in all of those books.
Yeah. Well, some of them more plain than others, but...
Yeah, some of them more blatant than others, but...
There's the series of guns that are named for different, like, 80s action movie heroes.
Yeah.
But I forget, they're in one of the Chromebooks or something.
That's sort of where I pulled the Memorial Hospital from.
Okay.
But you want to get into the real point for this episode?
What, the night that Bubba went crazy?
Yeah, the night that Bubba went crazy.
Okay. So let me start to set this up. There were, I want to say, at least 5 people playing at this point. There was our Discord user, Lucifer. There was this guy named Tony. There was our Discord user, Andy. And then there was my roommate, Dan. And I believe his girlfriend, Bonnie, was playing with us as well. And our friend, Scott. Now, Andy played the Twinkie Avenger. And in my memory, it wasn't the Twinkie Avenger that was involved this night. It was a different character of his, but he remembers it as it being Twinkie. So that's what we're going with, because it doesn't make a big difference to the story all in itself. So, and our friend Scott played the Cyber Knight. And I don't remember off the top of my head what Dan and his girlfriend were playing. But in any case, I want to say they had to leave partway through the session or something. And that's how they actually escaped their fate. So anyway, for whatever reason, we had to introduce a new character for Lucifer. And he wanted to play a pixie. You know, like a little fairy folk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he makes this character whose name is Tink, who is just a little pixie. And they have some, like magic powers and stuff. But essentially, they're, like a Tinkerbell, so to speak, right?
Right.
So, of course, I'm like, well, I don't want to do the bar thing. So what can I do that'll be not a bar? So I'm like, oh, maybe they need to go into town and pick up supplies. Honestly, not much more original, but anyway, it seemed it at the time. So I'm like, well, okay, so yeah, you need to go into town to pick. So they go into the store, and it's, like a general store, grocery store kind of place, right? And this is where I decide that they're going to encounter Tink. And so I turn the players loose. I don't remember exactly how it all happened, but Tink basically manifests as this little glowing ball of light that flits around. So now we need to set up a little bit that Bubba, who was being played by a guy who was actually a Navy vet and was still in college, but done a couple years in the Navy before coming to school. And however when he did this, he built the character that was called I think he was a coalition grunt, basically just an infantryman that had left the coalition. That's how we did his story, right? He was no longer part of the coalition forces, but that was his class, so to speak. But for some reason, we had rolled stuff, and his height, he was like 5'3" or something. Like, he was incredibly short, and I don't know why, but his armor was pink.
Okay.
I don't remember why that happened. But I mean, he's like just this little stumpy badass, right?
Yeah, I know a thing or two about those.
And he has this phobia for what Riffs calls DBs, or dimensional beings, which are basically like magic creatures and whatever. Well, normally this isn't really an issue because he keeps it under control or whatever. Well, I don't remember all of exactly why or how this came about, but he sees Tink glowing and flitting around, and then Tink starts talking to them. Well, this kind of freaks Bubba out. And again, I don't remember the details of them playing it out, but I'm sure there was some play that went back and forth and this and that. Well, then, of course, Bubba decides to trying to start shooting the light. So they end up just shooting the crap out of this store they're in, right?
As you do.
Yes, and of course, now this is Riffs, and they have mega damage weapons. So, like, we're talking, they're blowing basketball-sized holes through the wall of the store.
As you do.
Yeah, right. Okay. So finally, one way or another, they knock Bubba out. I would imagine Twinkie was involved in this somehow in Cybernet, whatever. They knock Bubba out, and they tie him up, and they put him in a truck, and they go back to the base. Anyway, they get him in the truck, they go back to their little base or whatever, and then Bubba comes to, right? And he's still convinced. At this point, he's convinced that the store is some sort of like nexus point where all these little talking balls of light are coming through. and don't ask me why, in some fit of madness, I had given them an assault helicopter.
I feel that sometimes, okay? As somebody who likes to give their players nice things, I feel that sometimes.
You mean like a boat on top of a hotel?
You mean like what is now an airship on top of a hotel?
But in any case, right? So somehow Bubba gets loose, or maybe they just knocked him out at this point and kind of calmed him down. But he's still thinking, and I don't remember if Tink followed them. I know Tink came back with them in some form or other. I don't remember the details on that. Is there anything in that email?
It says he followed them back to the house.
Okay.
And they put Bubba to bed, and then he was going to reintroduce himself to Bubba.
All right. So at some point, Bubba wakes back up and decides the store is like some sort of nexus point or gateway where these things are coming through. So he somehow or other gets into the chopper and starts to go blow the crap out of the grocery store. Well, somehow or other, Twinkie ends up in or on the chopper with him. Okay. This is the part that actually just came back to me a little bit over the past week or so that I've been thinking about this. I kind of have a memory of Lucifer having some sort of illusionary magic abilities with that character. And so Tink, in an effort, because Tink doesn't want to see the store get blown to Kingdom Come, right? So he tries to manifest the illusion of like a dragon or something in the air in front of the helicopter. Because we all know that always ends well, because the guy who was the military grunt who managed to roll well enough to get the helicopter off the ground now has to take evasive maneuvers and is already somewhat mentally unstable, right? So this, that, the other thing.
That's one of those best case, worst scenarios. Best case, he freaks out by the dragon and lands the helicopter. Worst case, he tries to dodge the dragon and crashes the helicopter.
I'm pretty sure he freaked out, lost control, and crashed the helicopter because I remember Twinkie dying in the helicopter crash. At which point, Andy looks at Tony and goes, "Okay, now I'm going to play your insanities. I'll be the voice in your head." So they crash the helicopter. The rest of them are chasing him in the truck. And I think maybe at this point, Dan and his girlfriend had to leave or something because I remember them being there at the beginning, but they didn't die. So I think at some point they had to they had something to go do, or maybe they had class early the next day, or I don't know. I don't remember those details now. But they check out at some point, and their characters go off to do whatever it is. But I want to say the Cyber Knight chases them down the location of the crash, finds Bubba in the hulk of the crashed chopper. Bubba's in really bad shape at this point, but he manages to drag him back home once again. Again, I don't remember all the details, but somehow at this point, he's pretty sure, Bubba has lost it. So he makes sure he takes all Bubba's guns and his knives and all his stuff, right? What he doesn't know, and I had not remembered, is that Bubba had a mini laser blaster implanted in one of his fingers. So I'm thinking maybe they tied him up or something, knocked him out again, in any case. But he starts to get loose again. And at this point, I remember the Cyber Knight is trying to basically wrestle with him to subdue him. And they're doing this, and the way armor works in Rifts, for the most part, your MDC, which is your mega damage, which is what all your lasers and stuff do, most of that armor is full coverage environmental. Well, Cyber Knights have this weird thing where they have some mega damage armor that's cybernetically implanted in them, but they still have what functions much like an armor class in D&D. And if the strike at them is above that, it actually hits the fleshy bits, not the armor, and 1 mega damage is equal to 100 basically hit points. So you really don't want that to happen, because it basically is just going to kill you.
Right.
So they're wrestling, and somehow Bubba manages to get a shot off with the laser blaster and actually beats the armor of the Cyber Knight, killing him. And so now he's basically limping off. I think he had shot his own foot off to get out of however they had him restrained, or something crazy.
Yeah, so what they have written is a little bit different from what you're saying is, so he followed him back to the house, they tied him up, Bubba came to and then killed Andy, and then they knocked him out a second time, got tied up again, he cut off a foot or a hand to get free, and then Andy, while playing his psychosis, convinced him that everyone had to die, and then Bubba kills everyone. It's just literally that Bubba kills everybody, comma.
See, the way I remember it, I want to say somebody else died in the helicopter crash, because I remember Twinkie was the first to die. Because I to this day remember him looking across the room and going, "I'm going to play your insanities."
Right.
But in any case, like I said, so you can imagine this is just chaos going on right at the table, because you've been in situations where things go haywire. Well, this went haywire and just continued to spiral from there. But I want to say it ended up with Tink basically killing a badly injured Bubba, and then me going, okay, yeah, I don't think you can play Tink again. I don't think that went very well. But like I said, I don't know. It was funnier in my mind than it seems like it was when I just told it now.
No, that's ridiculous and awesome, and that's, if I'm honest, that's why I come to RPGs for.
Well, and look, okay, here's the thing, right? This literally happened. I met Andy, it would have been the fall of 96, maybe? Yeah, I think it would have been fall of 96. So, I mean, this has been... I'm old. I can't remember things anymore. But yeah, this would have been, in the mid 90s. So I mean, these are memories that for all three of us are 25 plus years old. Yeah, it would have been 95. So yeah, we're talking 25 years ago. But like you said, those memories stick with you. And I've actually reached out. I'm friends with on Facebook with a couple of the other people that were there, and I reached out and asked them if they remembered any of it. They do remember it, but not to add anything to it. But yeah, Lucifer and Andy, they were both there. And so that's the story of the night that Bubba went crazy. But there is a follow-up story to it. But I want to let you tell a story if you've got a good one.
Let me see here. I do have a good one, actually.
Okay.
I got one. It's a little bit tame, but it definitely is one of those stories. It's not the night that Bubba went crazy, but it's one of those stories that my players are going to remember and honestly despise the player that did this for the rest of their days.
Okay.
So, in my long-running D&D 2nd Edition campaign, so by a long-running campaign, I technically had two. I had one that was very long-running that ran for about 2 years, and then I had another one that was about a year long.
All right.
So, I say that as long-running, but for me, to run a campaign that's anything longer than a year is too much. I want to play too bad, and I want to do other things too bad to run a campaign that's just keeps going.
Mm-hmm.
So, my crew, in an effort to track down somebody, I don't remember quite the context of why they were there. I think they were recruiting an army to try and fight against the big bad. They hopped on a ship. And if you know anything about most Dungeons & Dragons campaigns, anytime that you go on the water, that's a bad time. Well, they hopped on this ship and went to this island off the coast of their, like, main continent.
Okay.
When they arrived, they found a bunch of people worshiping a queen, and it seemed like this town had sort of been frozen in time. Well, come to find out that they have a vampire problem. As a matter of fact, everyone on the island's a vampire.
Okay.
And all they had to do was play nice. And they tried. They tried very hard to play nice. Except we had one very holy paladin who did not want to play nice with these evil vampires. And so he would get like foaming at the mouth, angry and wanting to fight these guys, and like they're talking him off the ledge, and they finally get him back onto the ship, and he hurls one insult to their queen, and the whole island turns. You could have felt a pin drop. And in a fit of brilliance or insanity, I'm not 100% sure yet, their elven ranger decides, yeah, I don't need this crew anymore. And he goes, I turn to the queen and I take a knee. And so now they're down a man against an entire army of vampires. And we ended that session right there. And we never went back to those characters. Because the conversation that we had was, where we ended it right there was when he took that knee, everybody, there was a collective boo at the table that came out as he was a turncoat. And then I looked at his character sheet and realized why he did it. I had forgotten that he was the only character that was chaotic evil. So he did not care. He was just like, yep, no, problems. I want to be problems.
I'm saving me.
Yeah. And it was brilliant. And I loved it. It was a great play. But everybody hated him for that. And so he was never allowed to play Rangers again. He's like, not allowed. You can't play Elven Rangers. You can't play. He's like, I want to play. No.
I fail to see the connection between...
I do too, but they were worried he was going to bring that character back.
Now, see, after the night that Bubba went crazy, I still remember, and I'm looking at the players, and I'm going, okay. And I mean, the thing is we've been just laughing at the whole thing all night long, right? And I go, well, did you all have fun? And they went, oh, hell yes. And I'm like, oh, okay. Then we proceeded to make, more characters and kind of reboot the campaign. But
well, and that's what sort of happened with my D&D campaign was I looked at him and went, all right, so you hate his character, but did y'all have fun? And everybody's like, yeah. And I looked at him and I go, other than irritating your whole party, did you have fun? He's like, yeah. He's like, I finally got to do the thing I've been wanting to do. I was, what's that? He's like, screw the party over.
Jeez.
I'm like, that's just mean. You don't need to do that. He's like, no, you don't understand. He's like, I've never done that. And they were all like, yeah, and you'll never do it again either. So now they watch. Anytime he makes a character, they watch his alignment like a hawk.
Oh my. See, that's one of the things I do like about the Palladium system is their alignment is actually really good. And I like the fact that they have like 10 bullet points under each one that give you an idea of what the alignment means, not just the tic-tac-toe chart that we all know.
Yeah, I feel that alignment in most cases is still just a personality quiz.
Kind of, yeah.
I mean, I used to laugh because I knew a guy that was like, would have been like early 2000s, that was like, unironically, I don't care what your zodiac sign is, what's your alignment? And I'm like, yeah, that was a bad take. Like, that's a thing that didn't age well. I'll just say that.
Well, all right. So, that your story for there?
That's my story for that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we got time to fit in at least one more little one here. And it's more of a gaming story, but it doesn't involve the game itself per se. This happened relatively shortly after the night that Bubba went crazy. My roommate, Dan, was playing with us, but I don't remember what it was, but he had something to do that week, and he had to miss a session. So after the session, Lucifer and I are hanging out in my dorm room, because we usually played. There was a little study lounge, like right down the hall. And so that's where we usually played. So we're hanging out in the dorm room afterwards. Dan gets back, walks in the door, looks at us and goes, okay, what happened? What did I miss? And just on a whim, Lucifer looks up at him and goes, we all died. And like I had actually at the end of the previous session, I had foreshadowed something I was going to do and something about, something weird anyway. And so Lucifer just picked that up, and we're talking, there was not even the, hey, do you want to play a joke on Dan? No, this was literally just off the cuff. So Lucifer makes up this story about, because after he played the Cyber Knight, Scott made a Jedi. We found a Jedi conversion. I'm like, okay, we can do this. Sure, why not? Because at some point, not long after that, or maybe it was even at that point, Lucifer was playing a Predator. Yes, you did hear me right.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to ask. It's Rifts. I just assume.
Well, that's kind of the thing, right? He was actually looking for a Grendel conversion, but we could never find one that we liked. But anyway, so he says something, it just makes something up that the Jedi did something, and the big evil thing came up out of the ground, and they all died. And I'm like half looking at him, but I'm like, I'm just going to roll with it, right? So then somehow, and that's the other thing. Maybe Dan had to leave that session early too, or so. I know I had his character sheet for the character he had been playing. So then the next week, I forget something, but none of us could make it work, or a bunch of us couldn't. So we skipped a week. So 2 weeks later, we get together. We're going to play. Dan has already gone and made a new character, all this stuff, right? And now, mind you, also in this intervening time, I've gotten a hold of everyone else and let them know what happened. So at one point, myself and Scott and Dan go to the dining hall to get dinner together, right? And this is the first time Dan has seen Scott since the incident. So he walks up and he gives him a big old punch in his shoulder, like, that's for getting us killed. And so, like, at some point, Scott looks at me and goes, you didn't tell me he was going to beat me up for it. But he still, he thought it was kind of funny, right? And like I said, somehow we managed to all like play this off, right? And at this point too, I should have mentioned Andy lived across the hall from us. Okay. So like, it was like we all ran into each other all the time, right? And it's a decent sized school, but it wasn't a huge campus. So like I said, 2 weeks later, we sit down to play. I had almost forgotten that we played the joke on him. And so I just open up the folder, go, here you go, Dan. And I hand him his character sheet. He's like, huh? What huh? So yes, we tricked my roommate into thinking that we had another party wipe.
I haven't done anything quite that mean.
Yeah, well, looking back, we made him create another Rifts character, which was probably not the nicest thing I ever did, but it was all in good fun, and I'm sure I helped him with it because, he was using the books that I had that I actually borrowed from somebody else. So
yeah, based on what you've told me about the character creation system and that, it's based on what I've read, it seems like a, how do you say, nightmare?
Well, I thought about it, and I actually added a little snippet in when I was editing last week's episode, and I think part of it, and I think maybe this is what you were trying to touch on when you were talking about the gatekeepering and stuff with games in that era, is that it really is a game that it wants to be your only game or your big main game, right?
Right.
Not just as a game master, but as a player too. And I guess to a certain point, when you're in high school, even when you're in college, you have the time for that, so to speak.
Yeah.
But when you get into adulthood, a job, family, or whatever, we don't have the time for that anymore.
Not to go back on an old rant, but I think it's a design philosophy that just sort of has changed over time. People's attention span aren't what they used to be. And I think that's sort of reflected in, and not saying that there's anything wrong with this, but it's sort of reflected in the fact that there are more rules light, throw it on the table, grab it up. Nobody needs to really know the rules too much. You could teach this game in 10 minutes. That's a pitch that I go to cons every now and again.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime I'm at a convention and they're like, hey, you want to try a new RPG? I'm like, I don't know. How long does it take to learn? And they're like, we can teach it to you in 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, you have my attention. Because if you can teach me how to play this and play this efficiently, then I'm interested. but I think that was one of the things that back in the day. So I think part of the other problem is that there wasn't a glut of options either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you weren't flooded for choice either.
Yeah, well, you were and you weren't. I think it was weird because, like, you had FASA had Shadowrun and Earth Dawn, and Palladium had all their titles, and various other games were out there. You know, I remember Rollmaster being talked about, although I never actually saw it. But it was a different time. Although I have heard that same sort of criticism leveled at the new edition of Warhammer Fantasy, and that it's not that it's a bad game necessarily, but it has some complexities that really kind of it wants to be your only game.
Yeah, and I feel that sometimes. I think the reason Dungeons and Dragons worked so well in especially that era, that second, third edition era, I think the reason that works so well is because that's a game that there's a lot of rules, but it doesn't take much to learn how to do it.
Well, the other thing, and maybe this was unique to my play experience, was most people only played with a few of the rules to second edition anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there was a ton of rules that no one ever bothered with.
No. And that's when I learned how to run second edition after running it horribly. I went out and I actually reached out to somebody who I was like, hey, you had mentioned that you ran a second edition game. Can you teach me how to play this? And they're like, yeah, here, we'll teach you how to run it. And that was one of the things they were like, there's a lot of rules that you just ignore. Like, there's a lot of things that you just don't acknowledge. Oh, okay, I understand. And still to this day, I mean, I run 5th edition that way too, though. There are things that I just absolutely cannot stand how it's done and just ignore it.
Fair enough. Well, that's, you know what, though, to a certain point, I kind of like playing sort of that way, you know, kind of fast and loose and reacting to what the players or the other players or the whole table playing off each other, not trying to follow like a really set plot track, so to speak.
Right. And I'm not a big fan of set plot tracks. I never was. I'm not a big fan of, like, give me a good, well-written adventure module and I'll take it and twist it the way I want to play it.
Yeah. Like, I think for me, I kind of look for, like, I want to call it like nodes in the story that I want to hit. But, like, so I've got some dots going through that I want to hit, but how we get from this dot to that dot to that dot, I'm really open to kind of whatever happens.
Yeah, I sort of am the same way too. That's why, and you know this, I hardly ever grab pre-made modules. I own it, when it comes to pre-mades in specifically Dungeons and Dragons, the only pre-made modules that I physically own is Tales from the Yawning Portal, because it's easy to open that book, go, what level are you guys? Okay, you're this level. Here's a quick, easy, you know, throw this on the table, we'll do this adventure real quick, and just side stories.
Mm-hmm.
But everything else, I really don't. Not that I think they're bad, not that I think they're badly written. They're great tools for people who aren't quite sure about this DMing thing quite yet. But for me, I would much rather tell you a story. If I don't have a story to tell, then maybe it's not my time to tell the story. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't have a story to tell, maybe I go, hey, Steve, do you got any stories that you want to do? You got any campaigns you want to run?
Mm-hmm.
And you go, oh, yeah, I've been toying around with this one, that one, and the other one. Well, do you want to run for a while and I'll play?
Yeah. Well, that's the beautiful thing, too. If you've got a table where more than one of you runs, and especially what's really cool is if you have, and this is kind of the situation I fell into with the crew that I ran with in college, was that this person ran this game, and that person ran that game, and this other person ran this other game. And so we'd be playing 4 or 5 different campaigns, but one person only ever ran one game, and so, like, everybody got to play, and we got to play all kinds of different games, and it was great.
Well, I know the feeling, and I mean, yeah, for me, I didn't used to, but I get burnt out really quick on stories anymore. Like, especially campaigns that I'm doing myself.
Mm-hmm.
I try and write ideas for them, and I get really excited at the beginning, and then I get sort of tapered towards the middle. And
Mm-hmm.
I rely on my players maybe more than I should, but that's just something that I need to work towards getting away from. But
Yes and no.
yes and no in that, how do I put this? Not that I rely on them too much, but I really feel like sometimes when there's lulls in what's happening, I should be filling that, and that's just something that I want to work on myself.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
But at the same time, I feel that my players end up, like, I don't walk away with a lot of great stories, but I think that part of that is my perspective. My perspective is, and I pay attention to what my players are doing, but my perspective is not these great stories that my players have. It's this perspective of, and I was the rule keeper. I was the one that kept, I was the one that kept the everything within spec, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so my players have stories of stuff that happened, and I'm like, sure, yeah, okay. I need to see about maybe bringing one of my players on and have him tell maybe a story or two of some stuff that happened, because they talk about things, and I'm like, I vaguely remember that.
Well, I think sometimes though, you're as the GM, you're trying to keep track of so many things, and you're not seeing it from the same perspective that a player is.
Well, and I think not only that, I think it's sometimes that, you're keeping track of so many things, and I know for me, it just feels like sometimes I'm just along for the ride. As a GM, I'm just sort of there. Like, let's be honest, you didn't plan out any of the night that Bubba went crazy.
Oh no, not at all. I mean, other than let's introduce the new player at the store. That was the extent of that the plan that was involved.
And I think sometimes that's how it feels to be a DM, is that you're just, or a GM, you're just there for the ride. Especially with sandbox games, it really happens with.
Mm-hmm.
Admit it. You'd have never thought that during Cyberpunk we would be throwing C4 horsies at cars driving down the road.
No. That was not on the list of things I expected to happen.
Or that our buddy's character would have successfully almost gotten run over and then shot that guy and then almost gotten run over again.
Yes.
There are things that you expect, and there's not things that you don't expect. And I think one of the biggest things is, for me, is that as a DM, as somebody who DMs a lot, it feels like a lot of times the stories that get told around the table of, oh, do you remember that time we did this? I'm sitting there going, I remember that, but I don't remember that the way you guys remember that.
Well, I think it it's like the old saying, the truth is stranger than fiction. And, what I mean by that is, like, the things that you can plan probably aren't as memorable as the, for lack of a better, the weird shit that fell out when you shook the bag.
And I think that's why we're such big proponents of yes-anding. We're such big proponents of just say yes, just see what happens sometimes. Because, even though you may not get it, you may be sitting at the table going, oh, this isn't the story that I wanted to tell. Your players, if they're having a blast, that's all, like, as long as it's not at the sake of someone or disruptive in any real way, let them have fun.
Oh yeah.
Let your players do what's fun.
Yeah, I mean, well, like we've heard us say it before. If your players are doing things between each other, it's entertainment that you didn't have to work for.
Right?
And
it's
you get to watch.
That's free. Like, that is free storytelling. And then at the end of the day, if you do that right, you take what your players were doing, you go, oh, not to get into too much of our campaign, but I go, oh, well, Steve wants to go look for his brother. Okay, well, let's see. Can I roll that into something?
Yeah.
Or this one's acting out like, oh, here's some more character stuff that I wrote. I have what I refer to as the Tragedy Twins. The Tragedy Twins it's a illusion wizard and a rogue. And the basic premise of them is they used to be like a traveling show. They would roll into town, the illusion wizard would go up on stage, he would do all kinds of magic and stuff and like entertain the crowd, while the rogue just sort of panhandled the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Just robbed them blind. and then they'd move on. Well, the point of the tragedy twins is if or when one of them dies, you grab the other one and go, I'm looking for my brother. Have you seen him? And then watch the rest of the party go, because they go, I did it once. I played them once, and I loved them so much. That's why I kept them. The one died. He died in a great battle, and it was just a good fight. And the other one shows up, and he goes, I'm looking for my brother Terrence. And the players all collectively go, who? And me as a player is going, oh, you guys are terrible. You're evil, horrible people. That's what you are. But stuff like that, it's weird. It's fun. Let your players do weird stuff sometimes. You know, again, if it's disruptive, maybe not. But if it's something if it's not hurting anybody and it's just sort of a weird thing that's happening, let it happen.
Yeah, sometimes it is fun to just hang on for the ride.
Yeah, I think that's the moral of the story of the night Bubba Went Crazy, is just sometimes you just gotta just hop on that roller coaster and watch what happens, because
yep,
it's going places. But
and like we said, that's the magic of RPGs is the memories, really, the stuff that you remember for years and years and years. And I mean, where else do you get that?
You don't get it out of a lot of media. You really don't. And, that's one of the other things is with RPGs, and this is something that I sort of talk about, is you make acquaintances and you meet people that play these games, and you make friendships with people that play these games that just, I've met people playing RPGs that become friends with people, have sort of networked within the space that I never thought I'd talk to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not out of like, oh, I wouldn't be caught dead associating with them, but it's more like I never thought I listened to shows on the D20 network. I never thought I'd be on it,
Yeah.
I like GM Eric and GM Chris's stuff. I never thought I'd get to talk to them.
Yeah, that has been a pretty wild ride in its own right. Like you said, it's like one of those, like when we finally decided to start a podcast, it's like, well, that would be really cool if we could do that.
Right.
And then we get Chris on, and he goes, well, I have a question for you guys. Why aren't you on the D20 network yet? And we're both just like,
Right. And not just that, but like, I've played games at cons where I've played beside people that I never thought I would play at a convention beside, just different voice actors and stuff, because one of the local conventions for us is an anime convention I went to fairly regularly. Well, I played next to a couple voice actors. I don't want to name drop because that's disrespectful, but I never thought I'd play role-playing games next to those people. But that's the kind of thing that, like, that's the thing I really like with Critical Role, is that it makes you realize that there are people out there that play these games that you never realized play these games.
Yeah. Well, that's like the video you sent me a while back, where it was Joe Manganiello talking about his home group, which among others includes Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine and Prophets of Rage, and there was the other one that they did with Chris Cornell.
Right.
But him, Big Show, and there were a bunch of other names in there that Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
And it's like,
well, I mean, you talk about somebody who doesn't look like, okay, bringing it back to the interview with GM Chris. You mean there's other movies other than Fast and the Furious? Do they have Vin Diesel? Well, you want to talk about somebody who plays role-playing games? Vin Diesel.
Yeah.
Vin Diesel's he's huge into D&D. That's not somebody you would think would play that.
Yeah.
But do they have Vin Diesel? Well, D&D has Vin Diesel. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But that's why I love this hobby so much, because you get to meet interesting people. You get to play these games and tell these stories that just you can't tell in other mediums. I can watch a movie and enjoy a movie, but I don't get my input in a movie.
Yeah.
I don't get to say to John Wick, no, we're not doing it that way. You don't get that interaction. And that's something that role-playing games has that other pieces of media just don't get. it makes for these memorable lifetime stories, you know, and these awesome adventures and just shenanigans sometimes. And that's the best way you can put it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's melodrama, sometimes it's silly, sometimes it's sad, you know. I've lost a character or two where I've genuinely been like, nah, I gotta stop playing for a little bit of time because I don't know what I'm gonna do now that I've lost this character, because I was emotionally attached to them.
I can see that.
You know, and it's just a really great hobby. And I know we're preaching to the choir, but I'm just gonna say it's a really great hobby.
Well, you know, and this is something too that, you know, since we started doing the podcast, sometimes, you know, I'll reach out and just go looking like, well, hey, maybe, you know, I'll hear someone on another podcast and go, oh, you know, maybe we could this. And to this point, every single person I've reached out to go, hey, can I ask you a question about this with podcasting? Or, hey, you know, we'd like to talk to you about this. Would you be willing to come on our podcast? Every single person has gone, yeah, sure. You know, and they're just nice people, and they, you know, it's like, and you end up talking gaming with them, and it's like you've known each other for years. You know, you're just having a conversation and you're talking games, and it's great, you know. And so, I mean, like, there's a lot of really, really wonderful people out there in this hobby, this industry, whatever.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I completely agree with that. And there's a lot of people, just great people out there in general.
Mm-hmm.
So with that bit of sappiness out of the way, you want to roll into Game of the Week?
Game of the Week?
Game of the Week. Game of the Week.
Is it my turn this week for Game of the Week?
Pretty sure.
Well, I'm actually going to go with something that I found it a couple weeks ago, and I sent you the link for it. But since you haven't used it yet, I'm going to use it this week. This is new or newer. He's had it up for a couple of weeks. This one actually is not on drive-thru. It's on itch.io, which is a similar site, but does a lot more with even more independent creators. But this is from John Harper, who is probably best known as the main creator behind Blades in the Dark. He's also written another game we've mentioned on Game of the Week called Agon, and this runs off the same engine as that, which I guess he is calling the Paragon system. In any case, you do need the Agon rulebook to play this game. But the cool part is that it is a name-your-own price with a suggested price of all of $3 for the download. And the name of this game is Chamber. The kind of like headline listing is, Chamber is a sci-fi intrigue playset for the Paragon system from the Agon role-playing game. A copy of Agon is required to play. For more on the Paragon system, including how to publish your own playsets, visit agonrpg.com. But then it goes down into the description. This and the imagery on the itch.io site are what kind of hooked me on this. It says, the year is 1968. 2 years ago, on January 7th, 1966, an alien energy, now known as the Signal, reached the Earth. It spread through the telecommunication system, affecting people and technology around the globe. Its existence is not publicly known, though its strange effects have been widely reported. You work for Chamber, a secret agency tasked with capturing or destroying signal-resonant materials, objects imbued with the signal, as well as containing its transmission and dealing with people harmed by it or working to harness its power. And the art is really it's really, I mean, it's neat. I don't know how exactly you describe it. It's like dark red tones, very kind of retro sci-fi alien-y. Does that make sense?
And that's the art. The story reminds me of a couple things. The story that they're proposing reminds me of SCP, which I don't know if you know what SCP is.
Off the top of my head, I don't.
Okay, SCP is a fan group of people who are like, I don't really know where it started or how it got started, but it stands for Secure, Contain, Protect. And they're basically these entities that exist in the world, and the SCP organization is out there to collect them and contain them. But it's sort of this idea that it's kind of like Delta Green, but it's sort of this idea that there are things beyond our understanding and things that can bring an end to this world. And I when I read the descriptor, that's the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, oh, this reminds me of SCP, and I could do a lot with that.
Hey, Steve, scroll down below the image of the character sheet on the listing.
I gotta bring it up. Hold on.
Okay. It says, Chamber adapts the fast and flexible Paragon system to a Cold War sci-fi intrigue and danger-inspired
Inspired
world.
by SCP Foundation Control and the X-Files. Hey, guess what? You
Nailed
did
it.
the thing. Congratulations.
Well, but I mean, I think it's cool that you picked up on that without actually reading it.
The sad part is, yeah, I picked up on that without reading it. I read the upper 2 paragraphs. I just didn't read that part.
Yeah, well, but like I said, it just looks really cool.
Yeah,
and I mean, Harper knows his stuff.
Interested. Yeah, this is one of those ones that give me through these holidays, because we got some things in the pipes we want to do, and I could easily see myself grabbing this and throwing it down on the table as a long-running campaign.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not like long-running is like 6 years. I'm talking long-running, maybe like my definition of long-running, which is like a year to 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And just drop this on a table and go, we're playing this, make characters, we're going to go, and telling this really cool intrigue story. I think that could be fun.
Yeah, it looks like I said, at least the setting, / era seems like it could be really, really fun to kind of play around with, and even actually, given the era, you could possibly, if you wanted to, depending, if you've got someone else in your group that runs something, you could kind of like bounce from this into, say, Fall of Delta Green.
Oh, easily.
Or, vice versa. If you're playing Fall of Delta Green, you could then maybe take on the story from the other side in Chamber.
Oh, very easily. Very easily. Like I said, I think Chamber is one of those ones that I just want to drop that on a table. I really do.
Yeah, it looks really interesting. So, what do you got?
Mine. Let me tell you about mine. What do you know about wrestling?
Actually, I haven't followed it in years, but I know some people who have actually worked in the business on various levels.
Good, because I got an RPG for them.
Oh?
I have Worldwide Wrestling 2nd edition, but before I get into that, I do need to extend an addendum. Last week's episode, I discussed the Evil Hat Games Dresden Files expansion, Nevermore. I didn't realize, and this is my fault, I didn't realize that was an expansion. I do need to apologize. I mean, I did get information wrong, but I do need to apologize that I put that out there like it was a brand new thing. It's not. There is actually an established Evil Hat Dresden game. I just didn't know that. That's cool to me. So hey, check out the Evil Hat Dresden game.
I saw a couple of people talking about it on Discord earlier today anyway.
Oh yeah, well that works. But yeah, I want to talk about Worldwide Wrestling.
I've actually heard of this.
Yeah, it's a Powered by the Apocalypse game. It's all about sports entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Rules for creating classic pro wrestling storylines, tools for players unfamiliar with the genre to participate. So it's going to be a great one for your friends that are like, I don't know about these RPG things. Well, that's okay. You know wrestling, right? Yeah? All right, here. Throw it on the table. It's Powered by the Apocalypse, so I can guarantee it's easy to pick up.
Yeah, well, I've actually heard this played at an actual player too. I don't know if it was the 2nd edition or the 1st edition, but I've heard a little bit of some playthroughs with this.
I like their little rundown of the features. They say it supports large or small groups, or regular attendance, drop-in and guest stars, or one-shot play. Quick character generation, which is Powered by the Apocalypse. That doesn't shock me at all.
Mm-hmm.
Play a single wrestling show in 2 hours, and then link shows into an ongoing season of play. That's actually really fun. In-ring action system.
I was going to say, I know the version of it that I had heard about actually focuses more on the, so to speak, the promotion and the behind-the-scenes stuff than the actual in-ring.
This version seems like it's a little bit of everything, because it talks about rules support building and maintaining feuds, getting over, gaining more fans, changing gimmicks over time, building tag teams and stables, moving behind the scenes, and much more. So that seems like it's a little bit of everything. It's a little bit of you playing a wrestler who may also be, maybe you also play a manager, or maybe you could play a manager.
Yeah. Like I said, it what I remember of it is that it is very much about role playing the whole wrestling production. It's not just the match.
Right. And that's cool too, because if you're a fan of professional wrestling, you are into, like, not necessarily, but you are more than likely into all of that.
Especially in the modern state of it, so to speak.
Right. It's a little bit more difficult to just be a fan of wrestling without being a fan of pretty much everything. So, But that's my pick, and I think that looks really cool. That's definitely going to hit my table sooner rather than later. That's a zip file for $15 on DriveThruRPG. Again, that's Worldwide Wrestling 2nd Edition. Links as always in the show notes. Check that out. You can always find our links to the drive-through articles in our show notes, or in the case of yours, it'll be an Itch.io article.
Yeah, we put the links to these in the show notes. There's links to our email, our Facebook, Twitter, link to the Discord server. You know, we'd love to have some of the people that we see, you know, listening to the show. I mean, obviously we don't know who you are. We just see that we're getting downloads from places where we don't know anyone, so we assume that we don't know you. But we'd love to have you come talk RPGs with us.
I mean, we are growing slowly. Our Discord is live and active. I love everybody on our Discord. It's great to have conversations with them.
Yeah. And you just get like random, one person will say something and then other, you know, I mean, it's Discord like any other, but you know, it's just one of those, you get the mixed perspectives from different people, and it's just great because
I know I scare some people because I'm not always on, like, I'm not always talking. I know you're always talking to people in Discord. I'm not always the most, like, talking to people, but every now and again somebody will say something. I'm like, ooh, that's in my interest. And I'll just like, they'll feel,
like,
hey, it's the other Steve. Where'd he come from? I do enjoy that both of our names are now Steve from me and Steve. Which causes some nice confusion for people as well.
Yeah. Well, I think on our Discord, mine says something about old Steve, but
yeah, I think so.
I haven't changed it yet,
but no, our Discord is growing, and we do have conversations happening. Like I didn't know about the Dresden Files conversation. I might need to go pop over and talk to them about that. It's just it's really nice. Really nice to have this growing fan base, and we really appreciate everybody who listens to the podcast.
Yeah, we really do. I mean, it's the growth. It was kind of like the thing you hoped for, and yet when you see it, you're like, holy crap, it's happening.
Right. I was excited when we hit 10 consistent listeners, and now we're seeing numbers above that at this point.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you know, obviously we watched the numbers a little bit, but as of right now, it is the 15th of December as we record this. We've already had more downloads in December than we have any other month.
Yeah,
and we're only halfway
broken
through.
Download records on just the month of December. And that's saying a lot, because the month of December is a bad month typically. We appreciate anybody who listens, and you know, if this is your first episode or if this is your last episode with us, if it's your last episode with us, please let me know. I want to know why you don't like us anymore. But no, I do want to know if you're dropping the show, let me know why you're dropping it. Let me know you don't like our rambling, you don't like this, you don't like that. That's fine. Let me know. If you think we should go in a direction, if you think there's somewhere we should talk about, something that we don't know about, you know, if there's a topic you want us to discuss, or if there's a guest you want us to have on, please let us know. We'll reach out to anybody. I am not afraid. At this point, I'm about 2 seconds from hopping on our Twitter and reaching out to James D'Amato. Like, I am not afraid to reach out to anybody in the RPG industry, short for Matthew Mercer, who I think is too busy to talk to us.
Yeah, he only gets pulled in how many directions?
Yeah, exactly. But it's been a really great honor to have anybody who listens to the podcast, and we joke and we laugh, but it is honestly astounding that you guys have stuck with us and grown with us. And we're coming up to next week is the Christmas holiday, and we want to wish, you know, everybody happy New Year's, and that'll be the next episode actually. But Merry Christmas, or whichever holiday you celebrate, and wish it a safe one for you folks. So
yes, exactly. So
with that,
it's time to be kind and go play some RPGs.
And stop messing with Bubba. Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can also find us at facebook.com/meandsteverpg. Thank you, and be kind to each other.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.
Did your dog lose its mind too? Because mine just lost its mind all of a sudden.
No, she was getting into something like not bad.
Oh, okay.
Just she just barked at something, but there's probably the neighbor's dog. She hates the neighbor's dog.
Well, my dog will occasionally like fall asleep, and then the slightest bit of noise will wake him up. So he gets very upset when there's noise.
You there?
Yeah. Sorry, your Discord keeps cutting out, so I couldn't tell where you stopped.
Oh, okay.
So what was the last thing you said? I'm sorry.
Oh, I just said, hang on, crap, I don't remember.